Number 5.
About 3 years ago, during the summer, when I was 12 years old, my mother and I would go bike riding on different trails as much as possible. We found a scenic trail that went through a somewhat wooded area and wasn't visible to the street. I was pretty short, so we rode back and forth many times, and at one point I sped ahead of my mum. When I got to the end, where we would usually turn around for another lap, standing near the bench was a woman somewhere in her 60s that was dirty and had raggedy clothes on. Normally, that would freak me the hell out, but I felt fine since I saw a child and his father nearby. Then, the woman said to me,
"Sir, please stop. Sir, please."
Having grown up being taught about stranger danger and things like that, I decided to just keep riding. I turned around and sped off towards the direction my mum was coming from. As I passed my mum, I yelled at her to stop, but she didn't hear me. I was too scared to go back after her because of the woman, so I rode to the start of the trail where our car was parked. I waited for about 10 minutes with an uneasy feeling the whole time. It wasn't a feeling of being watched, but more of one that something bad is happening. My mother came into view on her bike with an extremely worried look on her face. When she stopped by me, she said, "Thank God you're okay." I asked her what was happening, and she explained to me that the woman was saying that she had just been raped. My mum asked her when, and she said it wasn't long ago, so naturally she came to get me to make sure I was okay and hadn't been abducted or anything like that. We biked back to the woman and called the police. They showed up and told my mother to stand back since she was comforting the woman. They then put the woman in handcuffs, and of course, my mum was confused and angry. A police officer informed my mum that they recognised her and she had recently escaped from a mental institution and that she had a history of violence and was schizophrenic. The whole time this was happening, a kid around the age of 16 had come up to me seemingly out of nowhere and started talking to me. He said that he lived nearby and asked where I lived. I told him it wasn't too far from here. It occurred to me that this was an odd and somewhat unsettling way to start a conversation, but I didn't think anything of it since the police were only meters away. After that, the police asked me where I saw the woman first and things like that. When the police finished, we walked back to our car to go home, very shaken. The strange thing was that the kid that I had been talking to began to follow us on the trail. He kept making conversation, but also seemed to be sizing up my mum and I with a sickening smile on his face the whole time. He was making me very uncomfortable and seemed to have ulterior motives. We got to the car and he said goodbye with a slight grin, and then we drove off. I started to let go of my built-up tension from trying to stay natural in front of him, and nearly started crying, telling my mother that I thought the kid was going to try and rob us or something. My mother, however, thought he had something much more sinister in mind.
Number 4.
This happened a few years ago in the house across from mine in our quiet neighbourhood, and to this day, we're not entirely sure what happened. The news in our town is quite pathetic, and you get more information on local festivals than you do anything important, so it's no surprise. There was always this odd woman who lived across the street from us who had some very eccentric gardening habits, which caused her to be the butt of many jokes in our house. She would do things like water her yard when it rained, allow her weeds to come to seed and then mow them, much to my dad and our next door neighbour's annoyance. She would wrap tinfoil around the base of her trees to keep the bugs off, and one particular thing she would do was to mow her lawn at the dead of night. This itself wasn't too terribly odd because it gets very hot in the daytime, so people often mow in the evenings. However, mowing at 11 o'clock at night is a bit extreme in any case, I think. This particular habit earned her the title of the night mower in my household. She was actually a very nice lady, but there was something else about her that bothered my family, and this was not her personally, but the men she hired to help her with her yard. They were all seedy looking men who looked as though they might possibly have at one point, or still continued to, be involved in heavy amounts of illegal drug usage. From what we understood, at least one of them was related to her, and the rest were his buddies, but they were always helping her in her yard. We didn't dislike this woman. She never bothered us directly, and her behaviours were a minor nuisance, but the people who hung around her place were definitely unsettling. They never did anything bad that we knew of, but they were certainly suspicious, and at least rather redneck if nothing else. My dad claims he saw one of them take a leak in her garden at one point, which at least he attempted to cover himself with something, only this particular patch of her garden is right next to the road in front of our house. Everything ended rather dramatically one Saturday morning. I was sitting up in my pajamas in the living room with my family while my parents had coffee and talked, when my dad happened to open our wood door to look out of our glass front door. He stopped dead with a loud startled cry of, "Oh my gosh." We all looked to see that the night mower's house was on fire. All the neighbours gathered in their yards to watch, and the fire department was called. After watching for a while, I went back inside to read some more. Not to seem totally insensitive, but I assumed that the night mower had left her home and had forgotten to unplug something which had caught on fire eventually, and the worst case scenario was property damage. I wasn't particularly worried, as it never really occurred to me what the truth would be, especially not in our small town. What had actually happened was far worse, and it's a very creepy thought to think that this happened right across the street from us, and we never even knew. When the police got there, they found our neighbour's body inside the house. I don't know all the details, but it was an obvious homicide, I was told. Someone had set her house on fire to hide the evidence. I managed to find an article online, but like I said, our local news is useless, and there was no follow-up story. All we've been able to gather is snippets from what the police were actually willing to disclose. I do know, however, that one of the men who worked in her yard was suspected, tried, and then executed. This is the article. Like I said, it doesn't give much, and there was no follow-up, but this is what I could find to verify my story. What happened to that poor woman was awful, and it took a long time for that house to be bought after it was fixed back up due to the circumstances. It's a weird thought to think that this happened right next to us, and to a person we knew. I just hope the people who moved into that house are luckier than she was.
Number 3.
So this is a story about a friend who lives in northern Washington in the US. His name is Josh, and he's about 23, but this was when he was very young, around 8 or 9, and it's really affected him on a mental level, becoming less social and distant from almost everyone he knows. He lived in a pretty secluded country town, and he lived with his dog, father and mother who wasn't home much because of work, and his dad had job troubles, so he had to stay home and look after Josh and the house. They had been there for a long time, and Josh would wake up late at night, sometimes feeling very worried. It wasn't until weeks later that his father woke up to hear their dog, Rex, freaking out, but Josh's dad got him to calm down. He woke up later to go to the restroom and saw some guy standing in the middle of the field by their house. He was freaked out because it was such a secluded area that it was rare for people to go up there. He went back to his room after looking at the guy for a while and noticed that Rex wasn't where he was every night. His dad freaked out, grabbed his rifle and ran outside to find the guy, thinking he may have taken the dog, but he couldn't find anything. It was strange, and he jumped to the conclusion that the guy had actually left the doors open so that Rex could get out. At the crack of dawn, the dad went out looking around the field, only to find Rex's almost headless body in the middle of the field. It obviously impacted him, and he buried Rex quickly, telling Josh that he ran away chasing something last night. Josh was upset, but hoped he would come back soon. For the next 2 weeks, Josh's dad would get up every night about the same time, and he would go upstairs and look out the window, and there he was, the same guy, staring near the forest line. After a while of his dad doing this, he was fed up with this creepy fucker staring at the house every night, so he got his buddies and tried to look for this guy. They set up tents in the field, and Josh's dad saw the creepy guy in the outskirts of the field in the tree line one night. He and his 3 buddies went into the forest soon after that to try and find this guy, but after 2 hours of looking, they found nothing. But one of his buddies left early, scared shitless for some reason, He only said that something almost got him in the woods that night, and that's all he would say. Josh's dad soon after told his wife about what was going on, and she was worried about the safety of both Josh and his dad, so she'd asked the sheriff to take a look around the next day. But that night the guy came back, and he was screeching and shouting unintelligibly like a fucking demon. Josh's dad had enough of this fucker, so he took his gun and was about to go out after him when Josh woke up. His dad told him that he was going to go look for Rex, but Josh knew something else was going on because of the weird screeches minutes earlier. His dad told him to shine a light at the forest and to stay at the porch until he gets back. Just as his dad got his boots on, the creep screeched again, and Josh's dad said something like, "Oh, you're fucking done, you creepy stalker," as he sprinted towards the tree line. Josh shone the light into the forest for hours, scared and worried for his dad, when around 6 a.m. his mother got home from town with the sheriff. She freaked out because her husband wasn't answering the phone and Josh was sitting on the porch still. Josh told his mum that his dad had gone out into the forest looking for Rex. His mum was frantically telling the sheriff everything after sending Josh to bed. The sheriff got some backup and started to search the forest for any sign of Josh's dad. After days of searching, only finding his glasses and wallet alongside a shredded but clean jacket, they thought the worst. They kept searching for another week, and at the other end of the forest was a fallen tree. There they found Josh's dad's rifle, along with a shredded bloody boot. They pronounced him missing, but not dead, since there wasn't enough evidence to conclude that yet. The sheriff went looking alone on the last day and saw someone at the very end of the forest across the end of the river that flowed down to the town. The guy was crouched down, eating something, and saw the sheriff and just ran away. He couldn't do much but look, since the river was separating them. The sheriff told Josh's mother, and they soon moved out of the house and the area, not knowing exactly what happened to Josh's father or that creepy man. I was told about a month ago that Josh went back to see the old town with a buddy while taking a business trip, and the buddy went to Josh's old house to check it out to confirm his story. Josh stayed in town. When the buddy got back, he was shaken and told him that they should leave soon, because the house had been closed off, but he could see from within inside that there was someone moving around inside with a lamp.
Number 2.
So, a little backstory first. My name is Peter. I'm 19 now, but this happened a few years ago when I was maybe 11. My older brother got his first summer job working as a groundskeeper each Saturday at the church. It was a huge, rural area, way more than a 14-year-old could handle alone, so our parents always came with him to help him and drive him there and back. I was allowed to come too if I wanted to help, and I would receive a little bit of money if I helped. My job was picking up sticks so that the lawnmower wouldn't run over them and be damaged. This meant that I would often be off on my own, while the rest of my family mowed the many lawns far away. One day, I was picking up sticks alone near the fenced edge of the property next to the parking lot when a man got out of his car and walked up to me. Then he began to talk. He was tall, and not just by my 11-year-old perspective. He looked really normal, but I did not recall ever seeing him at our church before. I remember him leaning on the fence from the other side and motioning me over. I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. He smiled and politely asked me where the Heritage Museum was. Now, as I said, the church was a large area, and it also contained a small heritage museum on the property, not very far from the church itself, but still on the opposite side of the property. It had its own driveway and a sign. In other words, it should be pretty obvious to anyone where it is. I told him it was just down the road and that he should be able to see the sign. The man lost his smile and appeared distressed and asked me again where it was. I was confused. To me, its location was obvious, and I didn't understand why this man needed my help. I repeated myself and pointed in the general direction of where he should go. Then he asked me if I could lead him there. He beckoned for me to come over and walk with him there. I should mention, even if he was on the other side of the fence, I was still near the entrance to the parking lot. It would have taken maybe 7 or 10 steps for him to reach the entrance, and then there would be no fence between us. Basically, he was very close. Now, stupid 11-year-old me still doesn't have any sirens going off in my head. I'm still assuming this is just some man that needs my help. But I at least had some sense, and going with him was not something I wanted to do. Not because I was suspicious of him, but because I thought I needed to continue doing my job. Today, it just so happened was an event going on at the church that had just ended, so there were a few people who finished it standing outside the church talking. I pointed over to the church, which wasn't too far away from me. It was within shouting distance to give you a general idea, and I told him that there was a crowd of people there I could get to help show him the way. The man looked up when I said this, and apparently noticed the people there for the first time. I think I remember his mouth opening, like he was surprised or about to say something else, when he simply muttered,
"Never mind,"
and walked back to his car and drove off. He drove off in the opposite direction of the museum I directed him to. It wasn't until years later that I realized how shady this whole situation was. The location of the museum was obvious, and yet a grown man actually got out of his car to approach a young kid, alone. I'm guessing he also knew that my family was off doing their own thing and would be unable to hear me due to the distance and noise the lawnmowers made. As I said, it would not have taken him much time to walk around the fence and to get to me if he wanted to. If I had went with him, or if there was no lucky church event happening on a Saturday, or if I had not pointed out the adults from that said event nearby, I believe I would not be here today. It's scary to think that something like this actually did happen to me, and I didn't even realize it until years later.
Number 1.
I guess if you spend enough time alone outside in the dark, you're bound to have some creepy shit happen. After trying to capture the Perseid meteor shower, I took a friend home that had come out with me for a little while. I thought about going home myself, but decided to go back to Houston Woods to see if I could actually get a meteor shot. The night was spectacular and clear. I saw several meteors streak across the sky in a few different colours. I also saw some things that I can't quite explain. Staring at the stars long enough and you'll notice the Earth moving as you see the stars travel across the night sky. From 1 minute to the next, they barely move in any appreciable amount. So when something that is the same pinpoint of light as the stars nearby starts moving in tandem with another point in the same size, it's unmistakably noticeable. I saw 2 lights, just white without any other accompanying lights, move together against the night sky. They were not flickering, and they stayed the exact same fixed distance apart from each other. They were flying at about 45-degree angles to the ground and moved across the sky this way without arcing across the midway point, about 45 degrees from the horizon, so midway between the horizon and straight up in the sky. This leads me to believe that it was not a plane seen from the bottom, and given the size of the lights, it was very high in the sky. Again, before it started moving, it was easily confusable with the stars behind it, and that's the thing. I was staring at the same spot, and those 2 lights began moving, which means the entire hour I was looking in that direction, they had just been sitting there, blending in. It moved in a mostly linear fashion until it abruptly moved downwards and then disappeared, which took approximately 5 minutes from start to finish. My mouth just dropped open the whole time. Considering that most of my jaw-dropping up to that point was from the meteors, this was really something to me. But that was far from all that happened. While I had my camera set up to shoot 33-second exposures on automatic, I was just lying on the ground, looking up. There was a trash bin that I passed on the way pulling into the spot I set up at. About 10 minutes into shooting, I heard a very loud thud, and then several knocking sounds. It was unsettling enough that my eyes watered up and my heart began racing. I heard coyotes howling and barking all night out in the woods, but didn't feel threatened. Whatever this was, it hadn't made any noise sneaking up to the area, and it wasn't making any noise after the initial startling noise. I threw all my stuff in the car and used the test mode on my camera flash to light up the area several times as I tossed stuff in. I didn't see anything at all though. When I pulled out of the area, the trash bin was missing. It was big enough that I could have easily fit inside. I think the thud sound was the sound of it being knocked over. I'm not sure what the knocks were though. But whatever removed it, it was strong enough to move it and was quick enough that it got clear of where I was within at least a minute. And where that trash can was, you couldn't walk to the edge of the woods in a minute. And something absconded with an entire trash bin without being seen and without making any noise. I noped the fuck out of there as fast as possible. On the 30-minute drive home, things didn't get any less creepy either. Every single car, without exception, that I passed stopped in the middle of the road right behind me. Just before we passed, they turned their brights on and I saw their brake lights in my rear view and watched as they all came to a dead stop in the middle of the road. I even passed a cop that was sitting on the side of the road, and after pulling out behind me and following me for a few seconds, they stopped completely in the road and turned on their high beams. There were about 10 cars total that did this. I didn't see any deer or other wildlife crossing the road either. I cannot properly explain why these people would just have stopped in the middle of the road, in the middle of the night. Also worth noting is that each of the roads I have to take home are pretty straight, in farm country, and very long, with higher speed limits than you'd find on a city street. What the hell was going on that night?
G'day mates, it's B-Buster here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video guys. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all to hear. And for the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. And be sure to keep them coming guys, as this channel relies upon your stories to continue. Also guys, please do me a little favour and just state in your email what your story is about in the description, and also provide me with a short written statement of consent just so that I can be above board with everything. And also remember to tell me in the email if you would like to remain anonymous, and please also change any names if you don't want particular names to be shared. It would be awesome if you could like, share, comment and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for updates throughout the week. Thanks again for tuning in guys, and as always, I'll see you mates in the next one.